Our webinar today would have welcome remarks from the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact Network Ghana, Mr. Tolu Lacroix, followed by a keynote address by Ms. Rike Olsen, the Head of Cooperation of the Danish Embassy here in Ghana. And then we would have a brief on global standards by Ms. Salma Huabi, who is the Senior Manager for the Target Gender Equality Accelerator at the UN Global Compact. Then we will take a presentation on the 2024 Act, Requirements for Private Sector, by Madam Sabia Aku Pata from the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection. Then we will delve into a fireside chat on the topic From Quotas to Growth, Achieving the 30% Threshold. This fireside chat will be moderated by the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact, Mr. Tolu Lacroix, and this will be a conversation between him and Mr. Paul Dowuna, the Managing Director of Arla Foods. From there, we will delve into our interactive Q&A, where we would discuss your questions, give you answers, and then take your interventions on the topic and the interesting discussions we've had so far. And then we'll round it up with closing remarks and call to action. So without wasting any time, I'd like to invite Mr. Tolu Lacroix, the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact Network Ghana, to give us his welcome remarks. Over to you, Tolu.
Thank you, Rhoda. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, our distinguished guests, our colleagues, our champions of gender equality. I'd like to welcome you all to this very high-level webinar where we are discussing our topic for today. We are here together as a global community to continue our celebration of International Women's Day. The theme for this year is Rights, Justice, and Action for All Women and Girls. This is a powerful reminder that recognizing rights is just the beginning. True equality requires justice to enforce those rights and sustain action to dismantle the structural barriers that still hold half of the population back. So looking at this from the Ghanaian context, on September 11th, 2024, Ghana passed the Affirmative Action Gender Equality Act 2024, Act 1121. And this was a very significant piece of legislation because it was the government making a very strategic setting a very strategic bar and measure for change. So specifically, the Act sets clear mandatory targets for women's representation in key decision-making roles. 30% minimum representation of women in key decision-making bodies by 2026, with progressive growth towards a 50% target by 2034. So this would be a mandatory gender equity policies that would impact all public and private institutions within 12 months of the law's enactment. The Act ensures that women are not just invited to be at the table, but are influential architects of national and corporate strategy making. So is there a business case for this? Yes. So while the moral and the legal arguments for equality is well understood, there's also a significant amount of data that gives a powerful business case as to why this should be the target for all companies. So from 2025 to 2026, it is well documented that companies with gender balanced executive teams up to 20% have been reporting business outcomes that often outperform their peers, with margins nearing 40%. And this can be referred to from the ILO and then also the McKinsey & Company's Diversity Wins report. due to prospective leads, that this leads to better risk management and more robust innovation and innovation for revenue. Also, when it comes to talent retention, inclusive organizations retain top talent at significantly higher rates that show that protecting human capital drives modern business. So in short, gender equality is not a women's issue, it is a performative issue. So today's discussion and today's webinar, we're going to be looking at ways that we can actually make this practicable. How can we actually adapt this? So the action gives us the framework, but the framework needs our work. We have to put in the action. So we want to have this webinar move the conversation from just discussion to commitment to ensure that the justice rights for all women and girls is actually achieved. We don't want to just empower individuals. We also want to strengthen our businesses and our economy, and we must do that together. And the foundation starts with gender equality. So thank you all, and let's proceed. Rhoda, thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Tolu, for the warm remarks. To set the stage for our discussion, we are honored to have Mrs. Riek Engard Olsen joining us. Mrs. Olsen is a senior Danish diplomat currently serving as a counselor and head of cooperation at the Embassy of Denmark in Ghana. In her role, she oversees Denmark's development cooperation and strategic partnerships in the region, focusing on sustainable growth, governance, and regional stability. As head of cooperation, her insights into the intersection of international partnership and private sector growth are invaluable. Mrs. Olsen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting Denmark to deliver the keynote at this important event. Let me start by saying good morning to all of you and expressing my sincere appreciation to the UN Global Compact Network Ghana for convening this important dialogue and again for inviting me to deliver this keynote address on behalf of the Danish Embassy in Ghana. Bringing together leaders from across the public and private sectors to reflect on gender equality in business is both timely and necessary. And today's conversation is not only about social progress, it's really about economic transformation. Gender equality in business is not only a question of fairness and representation, it's fundamentally about productivity, innovation, competitiveness, and long-term economic growth. Across the world, evidence consistently shows us that when women are able to participate fully in economic life, companies perform better, economies grow faster, and societies become more resilient. The evidence is clear. Companies with more diverse leadership teams are more innovative, they make better strategic decisions, and demonstrate stronger governance. And research across multiple markets has shown that companies with gender diverse leadership often outperform their peers financially, and that diversity strengthens risk management, encourages innovation, and improves organizational performance. At the national level, closing gender gaps in labor force participation and productivity could unlock enormous economic potential. And in many regions, including in West Africa, reducing these disparities could significantly boost economic output and support more inclusive growth. So in short, gender equality is not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. For businesses seeking to compete in increasingly complex global markets, diversity is no longer optional. It's actually a strategic advantage. Denmark and Ghana share a long-standing partnership built on mutual respect and shared ambitions for sustainable development. And the cooperation between Denmark and Ghana spans sectors such as energy, technology, maritime services, agriculture, and digitalization. And within these partnerships, there's growing recognition that inclusive economic growth must also mean expanding opportunities for women. Across the Danish business community globally, companies are increasingly integrating diversity and inclusion into their corporate strategies. And this includes promoting women's participation in technical fields, leadership positions, and also in entrepreneurial ecosystems. Ghana too has made important strides in advancing gender equality in recent years. Women play a vital role in Ghana's economy across sectors such as agriculture, trade, finance, entrepreneurship, and the digital economy. Ghanaian women are innovators and business leaders and job creators. And the election of Nana Jan Akufo-Addo as Ghana's first female vice president marked an important moment in the country's political and social history. Her leadership really represents an important symbol of progress and demonstrates the growing role of women in shaping Ghana's national development. And at the policy level, the passing of the Affirmative Action Gender Equality Act represents another milestone in Ghana's commitment to promoting greater representation and inclusion in leadership and decision-making. However, legislation alone cannot close the gender gap. Real transformation requires action within institutions and businesses. And this is where the private sector plays a critical role. Because businesses shape labor markets, they influence corporate culture and determine who has access to opportunity. Companies therefore have enormous power to accelerate progress towards gender equality. It begins with leadership. Boards and executive teams set the tone for organizational priorities and workplace culture. When leadership reflects diversity, it sends a clear signal that talent and merit are recognized regardless of gender. But inclusion must also extend throughout the entire talent pipeline. Companies must ensure equal opportunities in recruitment, career development, leadership training, and promotion. And they must address the structural barriers such as unequal pay, limited access to professional networks, and workplace policies that may unintentionally disadvantage women. And most importantly, companies must build environments where women are not only present, but empowered to thrive. If we want to bridge the gender gap in business, 3 priorities deserve particular attention. Firstly, leadership representation. Diversity must begin at the top. Boards and executive teams shape strategy, culture, and opportunity within companies. Across Ghana, we already see inspiring examples of female leadership emerging. Leaders such as Patricia Obonai at Vodafone Ghana and Abena Osei-Poku at Absa Bank Ghana demonstrate how women are shaping the future of major sectors of Ghana's economy. Second, opportunity and access. Women entrepreneurs and professionals must have equal access to finance, markets, networks, and technology. And entrepreneurs such as Reroy Cables illustrate how women are strengthening Ghana's industrial capacity and expanding manufacturing capability already. Third, the talent pipeline of the future. The digital economy, green transition, and technology-driven industries will define the next generation of economic growth. Innovators such as Farida Bedway are helping shape Africa's technology landscape and inspiring the next generation of female engineers and digital leaders. These examples remind us that the question is not whether women are capable of leading Ghana's economy. The evidence is already all around us. The real question is how quickly we can remove the barriers that prevent more women from rising to these positions. Denmark's own experience demonstrates that gender equality is not only a social goal, but also an economic strategy. Denmark has one of the highest levels of female labor force participation in the world, and women increasingly hold leadership roles across government, businesses, and social public institutions. For example, Denmark's Prime Minister, the woman called Mette Frederiksen, is one of several women who have held the country's highest political offices. And women also play prominent roles across our Danish corporate leadership and public administration. Over the years, Denmark has implemented policies such as parental leave systems, flexible working arrangements, and corporate governance initiatives designed to strengthen women's participation in the labor market and leadership positions. These policies have helped build a more inclusive workforce while also supporting innovation and economic competitiveness. This perspective informs Denmark's international engagements, including our partnership with countries such as Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, bridging the gender gap in business represents one of the most powerful opportunities we have to unlock economic growth and innovation while advancing gender equality. It's an opportunity to build companies that are more competitive, economies that are more dynamic, and societies that are more inclusive. The leadership is already visible in Ghana. The ambition is clear. Denmark stands ready to continue working with Ghana, with the private sector, and with partners such as the UN Global Compact to advance this shared agenda. Together, we can ensure that gender equality in business is not only discussed, but realized. On behalf of Denmark, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Olsen, for those powerful remarks. We at the Global Compact Network Ghana are really excited about the support from Danida and the Embassy of Denmark in Ghana for our work in gender equality and other pertinent sustainability areas. Thank you once again. So now we'll welcome Ms. Salma Huabi. Salma is the Senior Manager of the UN Global. She's the Senior Manager of the Target Gender Equality Program at the UN Global Compact Network Ghana. With this program, she supports companies worldwide to advance gender equality across their operations and value chains. Her work focuses on embedding gender equality into corporate governance, risk management, and human rights due diligence. Salma has previously worked with the ILO and the Danish Institute for Human Rights, advising companies and governments on responsible business conduct and human rights. We're excited to have you, Salma. Over to you.
Thank you, Rhoda. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. It's really a pleasure for me to join you today on behalf of the UN Global Compact headquarters. I am speaking with you from a sunny Copenhagen, so also from Denmark. And let me perhaps begin by congratulating Ghana on the adoption of the Affirmative Action Gender Equality Act. This landmark legislation reflects strong national leadership and a clear commitment to strengthening women's participation in decision-making. We do know that by setting targets to increase women's representation across leadership positions, Ghana and other countries are sending a very important message that gender equality is not just a social priority, it is a governance and economic priority. But what we also do know is that legislation alone, it has never delivered change. Addressing ambitions oftentimes requires action from both the public and the private sectors. And businesses have a key role to play in turning these commitments into reality. And to give a little bit of maybe global perspective, we know that women make up nearly half of the workforce at a global level. Yet, according to data, according to various data, including World Bank recent data, women hold only 30% of the senior and middle management positions worldwide, and even fewer CEOs and executive roles. This tells us something important, because when we talk about women's leadership, oftentimes the conversation tends to focus on boardrooms, but the data shows that the challenge oftentimes begins much earlier. While women are represented in the workforce, they are significantly less represented in management and senior roles. And by the time they reach the highest level of leadership, that gap becomes even wider. So if we want to really look at women in decision-making roles, we do need to look further down the leadership pipeline. Because again, leadership bodies, be it boards, committees, or executive teams, are not built in isolation. They are the result of years of progression through management and leadership roles within organization. In academic jargon, we call them the leaky pipelines, as in if women are not progressing, through those pathways, representation at the top will remain limited. This is really why it's really important this is actually why achieving the ambitions of the Affirmative Action Act also requires strengthening the leadership pipeline from the beginning within organization, ensuring that women have equal opportunities to grow into management and senior leadership, decision-making roles by creating the enabling environment to do so. We at the UN Global Compact, we are very pleased to be working with member companies to help turn these ambitions into practical action. Through the Target Gender Equality Program, this is a program that has been implemented over 50 countries in over 5,000 companies. We have supported companies to identify gender goals within the organization, to set measurable targets on women's leadership and equal pay, but also more broadly to help companies set the target that is the most salient for their organization and implement strategy to close those gaps. The program builds on the Women Empowerment Principle, a framework developed by UN Women and the UN Global Compact that helps companies move from commitment to real and measurable progress at the workplace, at the product place, and at the community. We're already seeing very encouraging signals from companies that report to the UN Global Compact Communication on Progress, which is the UN Global Compact's own reporting mechanisms. Our data shows, and here I think it's taken from around the reporting of 15 or 16,000 companies worldwide, that 80% of the companies that report identify gender equality as a material issue. 81% have adopted a policy commitment on gender equality, and 76% report tracking concrete action to address gender-related risks and impact. So again, this shows that the private sector is increasingly recognizing that gender equality is not a slogan or a value issue. We are really talking about a governance, a risk management, and also a performance issue. To accelerate this further, the UN Global Compact has also launched the Forward Faster initiative, a program, an initiative that encourages companies to raise their ambition on the Sustainable Development Goals. Under the Forward Faster commitment on gender equalities, companies are encouraged to commit to setting clear targets to achieve equal representation and leadership opportunities for women, as well as to achieve equal pay for work of equal value. Again, the message is simple. If we want to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, the private sector needs to be moving forward faster on this. So I guess for today, my call to action is simple. For companies in Ghana, we encourage you to use the momentum created by the Act to accelerate progress inside your organization, to look at gender equality more holistically, and it has never been about perfection. It is simply about getting started. Getting started by measuring where you stand, first of all, by taking stock of your gaps within your organization, by strengthening leadership pipeline for women and setting ambitious goals, and then concretely report on them. And again, it has never been about perfection, just about action, because we know the business case is clear, has been documented for years, and we have also mentioned it today. When women lead, businesses perform better, economies grow stronger, and societies do become more inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Salma, for your remarks and your reminder. So we would now take a presentation from Madam Sabia Aku Pekata. Madam Sabia is a senior official with Ghana's Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection. At the ministry, she plays a central role in shaping national policy regarding gender equality. She will be taking us through the 2024 Act, requirements for private sector, to help us better understand the specific legal landscape we are operating in. Over to you, Madam Sabia.
So, thank you, Thelma, and good morning to your cherished listeners. It's a pleasure to join you all today to share with you Ghana's Affirmative Action Act. Please, I'm sharing my screen. Please, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Cherished listeners, As Rhoda said, I'm Sabia Pekata. I work with the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection, particularly the Department of Gender. I'm going to take you through a few provisions of the Act, particularly those pertaining to the private sector. Listening to the three speakers before me, I'm not sure they've covered almost everything on gender equality, but I'll still take you through the Act by way of presentation. We're going to have a brief introduction, justification for the Act. What is affirmative action? Look at key provisions within the Act, and then the status of implementation so far. Sorry, just trying to. Great. When we talk about the affirmative action, when we talk about the Affirmative Action Act, it's a landmark act in Ghana, and it seeks to provide for gender equality, equal opportunities for all, ensuring that our leadership is inclusive, and particularly calling for women's participation in decision-making. When we look at Ghana, which is not very different from other countries in the world, women make more than 50% of the population. So when women are not fully integrated into our development process, it means that we cannot achieve sustainable development. In addition to that, our voices should be heard at the decision-making table. It is only when we are there that we can present our realities for it to be integrated into policy. When we talk about the affirmative, when we look at Ghana, for example, when it comes to the percentage of women in decision-making positions, particularly in the government sector, you see that apart from in the judiciary, where it's above 30%, our representation in decision-making as women leaves much to be desired. When you look at the district level elections, for example, only 4.1% of women are there. When you look at the municipal, metropolitan, and district assemblies, the DCEs, we only have about 9.6%. Members of parliament still stands at 14.9%, and that's where most of our decisions and laws are made. So when our voices are not there, our perspectives would be underrepresented in policy. When you look at the Ghanaian Constitution as well, Article 17 provides a solid basis for an affirmative action. It says that the Constitution prohibits discrimination on the grounds of gender, race, color, or ethnic origin. Within the same Constitution, Article 35 says that there should be appropriate measures taken to ensure reasonable regional and gender balance. And then the Affirmative Action Act is one of such measures to ensure gender balance. When you look at Ghana as a country, the international obligations that we are signatory to, including the Beijing Platform for Action, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, including the Sustainable Development Goals, they all call for the elimination of discrimination and women's equal participation in decision-making. Therefore, when we talk about affirmative action, we could have affirmative action in all aspects of our lives. It could be with regards to persons with disability, among others. But this Affirmative Action Gender Equity Act is with reference to gender equality and calling for women's equal participation in decision making. Generally, an affirmative action is a deliberate measure to correct historical imbalances on inequalities and create equal opportunities for all. It is a temporal measure such that when we get to parity, it can be repealed. It's not really about women taking over from men. Listening to the previous speakers, you would all realize that promoting gender equality makes economic sense, and it's one of the measures that would ensure that as countries we achieve sustainable development. If more than half of the population, particularly as it is in Ghana, are left behind as a country, we would not achieve sustainable development. When we talk about the Affirmative Action Gender Equity Act, it was passed by Parliament on 30th July 2024 and assented by the President on 11th September 2024. The Affirmative Act is actually to provide for, the Affirmative Action Act is an act to provide for affirmative action for gender equity in our public and private sectors and for other related purposes. Basically, it seeks to promote gender equality, increase women's participation in decision-making, promotes equal opportunities for women and men, and ensure inclusive governance for national development. With regards to the object of the Act, is to ensure the attainment of gender equity in our political, social, and economic spheres of life. And it calls for government to promote policies and programs that would redress these imbalances in the public and the private sectors. When you pick the Act, particularly Schedule 1, which is on my screen now, it calls for the progressive achievement of gender equity. The targets are as follows. By the end of 2026, it's calling for 30% representation of women across all sectors. By 2028, it's calling for 35% representation. And by 2034, it's calling for parity in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. This target applies to all government institutions, the public boards, political appointments, and the private sector. So we must all work towards the achievement of these progressive targets. When it comes to the provisions of the Act in particular, the Act is in 31 sections and is in the following thematic areas. It looks at the principles of gender equality first, then it also looks at the Gender Equity Committee, the establishment of the Secretariat, the tenure of office, qualifications, the various institutions that would be part of the Gender Equality Committee. It also calls for gender responsive budgeting across all sectors. Another theme is also on affirmative action and gender equity in governance institutions. It looks at gender equality with our political parties, private sector, employment, and then there's another theme on the miscellaneous provisions, and it has 7 schedules. When it comes to, I'll just pick some of the provisions in the Act, which are very relevant to the private sector. The Section 13 talks about the Gender Equity Compliance Certificate. And in the Act, it says that the minister, on recommendation of the Gender Equity Committee, would issue gender equity compliance certificates to a deserving institution or organization. Going further, would look at some of the criteria that would qualify an institution to get a gender equity certificate. Section 21 of the Act talks about the private sector. And firstly, it says that the private sector shall ensure the achievement of the progressive targets of gender equality when it comes to employers. And that is, those targets are what I mentioned earlier on, and they are in the Schedule 1 of the Act, which it calls for the achievement of parity by 2034. It also requires that an institution should have a gender policy, which should be reviewed every 4 years, and it should be reviewed in consultation with the employees of that institution and must be part of the institution's strategic implementation plan, strategic plan. When you look at Section 22, it requires that institutions should submit annual gender equity reports to the Gender Equity Committee. When it's about with trade unions, the leader of the trade union should provide information on gender equity in their annual reports, which should be included in the trade unions or the organized labor's reports. With regards to compliance, which is in Section 23 of the Act, the Gender Equity Committee will determine whether an institution has complied with the provisions in the Act. This includes having a gender policy, submitting annual reports on gender equity to the Gender Equity Committee annually. Where an institution has not complied, they are required to have a written undertaking, which allows them to comply within 6 months. For cases that are brought to the committee, they might use alternative dispute resolution mechanisms to address issues of non-compliance with the Act. The Act also makes provisions for incentives for the private sector who comply. And then within the Act, it says that the Minister for Finance, in consultation with the Ministry of Gender and the Ghana Revenue Authority, is to develop guidelines for granting tax incentives to employers in the private sector who comply with the Act. When the member in the private sector complies with the Act as per Schedule 1, that is the progressive targets, they can apply to the Minister of Gender. They can apply to the Minister for Finance for tax exemptions. And these tax exemptions are applicable where they have complied with the Act within the first 12 months and after the first 12 months of when the Act comes into force. Again, the Minister for Finance, in accordance with the Exemptions Act, can grant tax incentives to an employer who has complied with the Act. In addition, it says that in line with the Procurement Act of 2023, it's 2003, not 2023, please. It's 2003. A procurement entity should be given a preference in the award of a government contract when they have complied with the Act and have a gender equity compliance certificate. The Act also provides for a procedure for grievance resolution. And it makes provision for a person whether in the private or the public sector, to submit a complaint in writing to the Gender Equity Committee on any issue of inequality or discrimination. It may be submitted in writing or orally, but when it's done orally, it should be recorded and a thumbprint taken. The person can also complain in writing to the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, SHRAJ. It is required that a complaint is settled within 6 months. Where the complaint is settled either by the Labour Commission or the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, a copy of the settlement should be submitted to the Gender Equity Committee. If within 6 months the complaint is not resolved, the aggrieved person may submit a complaint to the High Court, but then in doing so, they must notify the Gender Equity Commission. When it comes to cooperation with the public and private institutions, the ministry can seek information on gender equity from any institution, and the officer responsible should cooperate and provide that information. Where the officer fails to comply without any reasonable cause, there's a penalty of not less than 200 and no more than 500 penalty points, or a term in imprisonment of not less than 3 months, but no more than 12 months. When it comes to issues of data, the Minister for Gender can require any institution or body to provide gender disaggregated statistics on their institutions, and they are expected to comply. When it comes to offenses, the Act defines offenses as a person who victimizes another person, obstructs or exerts undue influence on another person because of their gender, and it defeats the object of the Act. For example, subjecting unemployment to gender-specific verbal attacks, stereotyping, hate speech, among others, or discriminating against them, and disqualifies them from any service on the grounds of their gender. And also, when you fail to provide information as may be requested by the minister, that is also an offense. And knowingly providing false information or data also constitutes an offense under the Act. For employers in the private sector, when you fail to comply with the provisions of the Act, it is considered as an offense. And then when an offense is committed, the person is liable to a summary conviction or a fine of no less than 500 penalty points and no more than 1,000 penalty points, and a term of imprisonment of no less than 6 months and no more than 12 months or more. When we talk about the Affirmative Action Gender Equity Act, it's talking about creating fair opportunities for everybody, removing systemic barriers to gender equality, encouraging inclusive recruitment, as well as promoting women's participation in decision-making and leadership. When it comes to the leadership of the private sector, so what are some of the things that you can do to advance gender equality? You need to promote inclusive workspaces, supporting women's career development, encouraging leadership, and ensure that your recruitments and promotions are fair. And you need to be committed to ensuring that you achieve the goals of this Act. As the previous speaker said, you need to start is going to be in incremental processes, but not doing nothing. But doing nothing would not help the process. For our men and partners in various private institutions, we encourage you to support the women colleagues into leadership positions, challenge these various stereotypes, and also promote a respectful working environment and culture, as well as mentoring female professionals into leadership positions. As we all know, promoting gender equality benefits all of us, including men as well. For the women in the private sector, leadership positions are not going to be given to you on a silver platter. You have to avail yourself, build your capacity, and then pursue leadership opportunities. For those of us who are already in leadership positions, we need to mentor the younger ones to also reach those heights. We also have to continue professional development and particularly developing ourselves, and support each other as women to reach leadership positions. When it comes to the status of implementation of the Act so far, the Gender Equity Committee has been instituted and they started work. It was instituted on 12 July 2025. We also have the strategic implementation plan as well as the communication plan for implementing the Act. Currently, the ministry is developing the legislative instruments for the Act. I think October last year, there was a meeting with key stakeholders to validate the various provisions of the regulations. It went to the Attorney General's department. They have incorporated the inputs. And then in January this year, we met with the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Gender, Children and Social Welfare for them to also review the legislative instruments and make their comments. These comments have gone back to the Attorney General's department for incorporation into the Act. Currently also at the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection, the Gender Equity Secretariat, as specified in the Act, has been established for work. And I also like to say that various private sector institutions have also started submitting their gender policies to the Secretariat for review. In conclusion, I would like to say that gender equality is for everybody. It's not only about women. We all stand to benefit as institutions. And when you promote gender equality, you unlock talent and harness everybody's talent for institutional growth and progress. It also improves service delivery, and it's a way to build a more inclusive Ghana. The Affirmative Action Act, I would say, is a call to action for all of us to promote gender equality. And its effective implementation depends on the deliberate efforts of all stakeholders, including the private sector, to ensure that we have a fairer society where everybody can effectively contribute towards national development. I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Madam Savia, for that incredibly comprehensive roadmap. It's clear that the Affirmative Action Act is no longer just a document. It's now a living framework for every organization represented here, both in the public sector and the private sector. Through your presentation, you've given us the what and the why behind this mandate. Now, to explore the how, we will move into a fireside chat with Mr. Paul Douna, Managing Director of Arla Foods. This conversation will be moderated by Mr. Tolu Lacroix, the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact Network Ghana. Gentlemen, over to you.
Thank you, Rhoda. Thank you so very much. Mr. Paul Douna, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good. How are you two?
Doing very well, doing very well. Unfortunately, we do not have a fireplace by which we could do this fire chat bit, but
Yeah.
you are definitely most welcome here.
Thank you.
Let's talk about Arla Foods. So for those who don't know, Arla Foods is one of the largest food companies in the world. And it's actually interesting because I read it is actually owned by several cooperatives globally, which means that the profits are going directly to the farmers, which is very, very interesting. But also, Arla Foods is also here in Ghana. I also saw that Arla Foods is actually a member of the UN Global Compact in Denmark. But then it also has a branch here in Ghana. So I think it's very interesting that this company already inclusivity is at the essence and heart and soul of the company. So it's a pleasure to have you here to be part of this fire chat, which is looking at gender. So let's start off with the business case of the why we've been discussing. You know, why should companies in particular embrace moving towards gender equality? Arla Foods has a strong global commitment to diversity, and so looking at the Ghanaian context, how can we say that women in leadership has directly impacted the operational excellence or consumer insights with regards to Arla Foods in Ghana?
Thank you very much, Tolu, and thanks for having me. And to the previous speakers, I think they've delivered very wonderful presentations and very insightful as well. Yes, so as you've indicated, Arla is one of the biggest food companies, predominantly dairy. And in Ghana, we've also been, I think we are getting into our 10th year, and it's been very, very, very interesting for us in Ghana. Proud to me taking over as MD. There was a female MD, actually the female actually started the business here in Ghana. So it's been something that when it comes to gender and gender issues, something that Arla has been championing over the years. Today for us in Arla, you see that with every sector or with every department of the business, we have women fairly represented, from production to human resource to marketing and sales. You have women fairly represented. And what we have seen is that you don't just have one-dimensional view or one-dimensional perspective, but you see that you have varying views, because when you have a place with only males, it has its own way of doing things. It may seem to come across, okay, you get an Atafa and all of them, but then when you bring in when you have a gender equity or gender parity, it gives you varying views. It gives you perspectives that you will not say it's just unidimensional, but multidimensional for me. And that I have seen in the 3 years that I've headed a business in Ghana. You clearly see it, that when you sit around the table, especially at the leadership level, you get to hear insights from both quarters, and you clearly see that, okay, if you didn't have such level of equity or such level fair representation, you will just have just one side, and that really impacts and affects business. So I have seen it reflect in decisions. I've seen it reflect in performance, and I can only hope for the best as we go along. So it's very, very important for us. Yeah.
Wow, that is also interesting. Just coming to the how part of this conversation. We've seen the acts and its requirements, and definitely we can see that Arla Foods has made a very intentional policy when it comes to gender equality. So On average, most companies currently are at the 24% threshold, which apparently is interesting because it does, in fact, lead the world when it comes to uh, women in key decision making. But for Ghana, we have passed an act that is pushing us to do a bit more. So just a quick one. What percentage does Arla have of females in key roles?
So today at the leadership level, we are 33% about there, and so there are 9 people on the leadership, and there are 3 women. So when you strike the average, it's 33%, and the
Wow.
leadership.
So you have already actually made
yes.
you have actually done that. That is so fascinating. So let's dive into that a little bit. So with that 33%, which is above the average, what would you say the internal structures that changes that was most effective? Was it the recruitment? Was this the mentorship? Was there a specific policy change? Kind of help us kind of have more insight into how this all played together.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, I think all 3 plays a critical role at several stages. So first and foremost is the bit of policy. Policy would mean it shows your intentionality and it shows your commitment to making this thing work. So we have a policy that gives room for women, that gives room to encourage women. When we have a role, it's put out there, we encourage as many women to do, especially roles. So we have vacancies or roles. We look internally, and then we give opportunity to everyone. But when we see that women show interest, we push them. Then it comes to the recruitment as well. Same thing. We also give that room for that. But more importantly, I would close with I would say that mentoring is very key, because if you want to promote from within, you need to make sure that you keep encouraging, putting in the structures to help the woman, or help the woman to be able to come up to speed. So all 3 plays a role in within the value chain. I'll put it that way. But mentoring for me is very crucial, and when you're able to do that, it helps. I would put all 3 together and say that it is intentionality on the part of management, or management, or those at the top who wanted it to be this the case. Very intentional.
Right.
Then you put in the policy, and then you get things working. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Just a quick one. Since I saw that Arla was a member of the Global Compact, has Arla used the Web's gender gaps analysis tool before?
So here for me in Ghana, no, but I am pretty sure that globally it is. But I'm sure as it started out globally, it will definitely be passed on for us to use it as well. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So as we had that wonderful presentation from the Ministry of Gender, we have this new act, and as part of the act, there's going to be a gender equity compliance certificate. And then we saw, it also in the act that she explained, there'll be tax incentives for those companies who comply, and then there'll also be criminal penalties for those that do not. I'm sure Arla does not have to worry his head about that. But I do believe that the act will also add some challenges, at least from the organizational perspective, when looking at data and tracking and reporting. It's another thing now that companies have to be looking at. So is Arla now looking at the act and trying to prepare how it will now organize its data to meet these new national standards that are being set by the government?
Yeah, thank you. So basically that is what you just said. Arla globally, let me just come there, and I'll end up with the question that you just asked. Globally, diversity and inclusion is a big part of our agenda, and for all our objectives for the year, it ends. We have the last objective, which is win with our people. When it comes to winning with our people, that D&I plays a very, very crucial role. So just that, as Ghana has passed it, we're also going to see how best to streamline all the things that are required, so that we will go to take advantage of the law that has been passed in Ghana. We're already doing it, but now we need to put the data in such a way that we can take advantage of some of the clauses that we have in the law passed in Ghana.
Wonderful. And just one last thought before we go to the Q&A. What would be your number one piece of advice to a new CEO that is worried that perhaps the board of his organization might not be ready by that 30% quota by the close of 2026? How could he or she navigate that challenge?
So I would say that it works. It works. There's initial resistance to it, because you feel, women has its own difficulties and challenges. But what I have seen is that you always have varied views. You always have varied options that you can dilate on to take the decisions that affect your organization. So that is why I would say that it works. Yes, we need to just put away our initial resistance and fears, and then challenge yourself as a CEO. That let me give it a try. Maybe it might not be full scale, but you give it a try, and then you would definitely see that women also bring a lot on the table. And I would also speak not just to CEOs, but to women who are also given the opportunity, that they also need to prove themselves. That when you are given the opportunity, you also push yourself to be able to meet the expectations of management. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I think you capped it off very, very well. And also representative from the ministry has also really articulated clearly that it doesn't mean that things are going to be given to women on a silver platter. We still want the best, but we know that with the population that we have, definitely there are some winners amongst them. So we want the best of women to participate. We want the best of them to come. But then we also, as you mentioned, we have different ways to assist the process. Leadership, mentoring, guidance, all these things are put in place to ensure that the very best of our women can, in fact, contribute. And then we have that gender contributions to our companies. So thank you, sir. We're going to go ahead and move right into the Q&A. So I invite the audience to ask any question they would like. Go ahead and unmute yourself. So if there are any questions about anything that we have discussed here, we would like to speak with our guests who have really done a very good job in detailing the case, making the business case, and then showing the how. We definitely would like to take questions from the audience at this time. Any questions, please? Any questions? Okay. Well, as we wait for questions to filter in, I think maybe people are still putting their questions together. Sir, I actually have a question for you. So one of the key things when it comes to the act is the certificates. I just wanted to touch more about that certificate. Do you foresee that we are going to start to see that this certificate is also in the future going to be required for companies looking to source investments from investors? How soon are we getting to that point where we will start to see things like that? I mean, after all, we do have the Ring the Bell for Gender Equality, which is celebrated across the world by various stock exchanges around the world. Do you believe that we'll get to a point where even they will begin to ask us to produce certain certificates like this?
Yeah, I think I think definitely we'll get there, and when from the way the lady from the ministry presented with all these incentives to businesses as they keep pushing it and businesses get to know some of these things, they would ensure that they will take advantage of it, and then now it will trickle down to other investors who would also want to see some of these certificates to push in further investment. So definitely a lot of work would have to be done from the ministry end for businesses to know, to take advantage of it, and then we can also push forward this. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have another question. We had a company called Busis Systems here in Ghana, and they took our Target Gender Equality program and they applied the principles, and it literally transformed their company. It led to them even changing their name. They used to be called Makeda Consult. They changed it to Better World System because they actually was able to see how when they really focus on target gender equality, they reached the target. They discovered so many different things that actually made the company far more productive. One of the key things they noticed was that the female workers, they actually stayed longer with the company and were more loyal to the company. And it was this core group of women that actually led to them discovering better solutions to their services, which enabled them to go on to become B Lab certified and get more projects from the UN, from other institutions. And if you go to the website, they have documented how they've impacted over 60 million people around the world. And this is an SME that was able to achieve all that. So I think that's another part of the story that does not really get that much attention. Could you speak about the retention of workers and how women contribute to the company over time?
Yeah, so I think that when you started with the question, I'm like, okay, I just reflected on my company and today the women, and so far for the past 3 years, I have not seen any of the women resign. Interestingly, so we've been able to retain the women that we have in the business for the past 3 years. I don't know, maybe beyond that, but I think it really works. You find women giving off everything, giving off the best, also being committed, especially when the organization has the right structures in place to also meet their needs. You see that they give their all and they're able to stay long with the business. And that also means that you don't have to spend to train new people to take over the roles, and you're able to have some consistency in terms of results and performance and then plans as well. So I think it really works. And I have an example of that to show.
That's a very good key point that you raised, is that it actually is saving the company money. So you can actually imagine if companies actually hit that 50% in the future, it's likely going to save them lots of money when it comes to retaining the information, retaining the history, the knowledge of how the company works, but then also looking at the cost of hiring new talent. And the cost of hiring new talent consistently goes up because there's a precedence where the incoming staff, you would actually have to pay them way more than what the current staff was being paid. So across the board, you could actually make the case that that having more gender equality over time increases the profitability of companies.
Which is true, because if you don't have to, don't forget that when there's the labor turnover is high, you would have to spend time and money in recruiting, time and money in training, time and money in upscaling to be able to get to the level that whoever left the role was. So all these things are money saved when you don't have to go through the entire process again. Yeah.
Okay. So we have a question from Pearl. She's asking, kindly confirm the process you need to go through to earn the gender equity certificate. Okay, I think this is a question for Miss, is she still with us?
I'm
From
here.
the ministry.
Yes,
Yes,
Sabia
I think,
from the ministry.
yes, Sabia, thank you. I think this is
Yes.
the question from you. Our listener is asking us, if you could kindly maybe give us a summary of what a company would need to do to gain the gender equity certificate.
In the first place, you should have submitted your gender policy to the Gender Equity Committee and demonstrated that it was done through a consultative process involving employees of your institution. You also should submit your annual reports on what you've done to promote gender equity in your institution. And we expect that within the annual reports, the data that is provided will show that you have complied with the progressive targets in the Act. So if it's for 2026, we should have at least 30% representation of women in decision making. And then the Gender Equity Committee would review these documents and then recommend to the minister for the issuance of the certificates. Yeah, within the reports, would like to see things regarding efforts made to promote gender equality within your institution. So upon the recommendation of the Gender Equity Committee, the certificates will be issued. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. May I ask a follow-up question? How
Yes,
soon can companies start applying for this certification?
What it is currently we have the Act in place, but the legislative instrument that gives force and clarity on the implementation of the Act is yet to go to Parliament for passage. But then
Okay.
I would also like to say that, as I mentioned in my presentation, a lot of the private sector, a number of private sector institutions have already started submitting their gender equity policies. And the passage of the legislative instrument is one of the key priorities for Parliament. So I don't think it will be very long before it's passed to give effect to the Act. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank all of you for participating in this session. It was a pleasure. Rhoda, back to you, please.
Thank you, Tolu. Thank you, Paul, for that insightful exchange, breaking down Arla Foods' commitment to empowering women to drive gender equity in their business. 33% is impressive, and given Paul's passion, I have no doubt that you would meet the 50% final target way before 2034. As we draw this interesting and engaging discussion to a close, I would like to thank all our speakers, Mrs. Rick Engard Olsen, Salma Huabi, Madam Sabia Aku-Pekata, and Mr. Paul Dowuna for joining us today, and also for our attendees. We couldn't have had this without you. I believe that the lack of questions is due to the understanding that you've actually gained from the comprehensive presentation we had from Madam Sabia. So thank you once again, Madam Sabia, for that. As we draw this discussion to a close, I would like to reiterate a call to action that we have shared links for the Target Gender Equality and the Forward Faster initiatives of the UN Global Compact in the chat. Please engage with it, share the insights with your boards and management teams, and begin the internal capacity building, the development of the gender equity policy and plan. So when you go through the target gender equality, you're actually guided to develop a gender action plan. So this can catapult into the policy that you need. That forms part of your strategic plan. And just like that, you began the process of earning your gender equity certificate. And I believe tax intensive will sound very good to your board and management. So thank you once again for joining us. This webinar is officially concluded. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Wait. Let's, if we can, Rhoda, let's take a picture. So if everyone can turn on your cameras, let's take a picture so that's...
Yes, a brief shot before.
So that a very quick one. Yeah. So let us know when you have it all together.
Do you have us all?
So tell us when to smile. We're ready.
Okay. We are still waiting for some of us to turn on our cameras. Is it good?
Okay. So should we say gender equality? Yeah, I think if we do that one. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Gender equality.
Thank you so much. We have it. We have the shot.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.